Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Mollie Carmichael here with Housing Insights. We're going to talk a little bit about today's consumer home innovation and really what counts today. We're also going to involve you in a little bit of a survey too as we go. As many of you know, there's a lot changing out there. It seems like there's some turbulence out there, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So a little bit about Zonda too. As all of you know, we have Enterprise today, and hopefully you guys are all using that. Any questions, please reach out to our team. It's terrific to now have all the Metro study, the Zonda data together into one place, and the power behind this new vehicle, it's pretty great. So again, from graphics to visuals, maps, you name it, it's all there at your fingertips. So as all of you know, as I've spoken in the past, there are key things that you're looking at to really kind of connect who your customer is to what your strategy is. And I don't know how you do it without understanding your consumer first. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but specifically today, we'll talk about where the growth is from a demographic perspective, some of the demand factors that are out there, and then connecting the dots to really what consumers are looking for in home and community today. And again, we're going to involve you in that process. We'll also touch on some of those things regionally. Sometimes it's really hard to break this down to all the different geographies that each of you are in. So I try to do that as much as I can, but just know we're showing like 10 to 20% of what we can offer, and we can really make this very powerful for you. The key thing is, at the end of the day, just to simplify the process, though, we try to really understand who is out there shopping and who's going to be living with them. So what life stage and how does that impact the way you design at home? And then, of course, what they're looking for and what they can afford. And the impact of how far they will drive obviously is going to impact the kind of product you're designing. And there's a lot of shifts happening there today. And then last but not least, what are those key things that will actually make them move? So change is definitely inevitable. We're seeing values are projected to be up, but obviously with interest rates and some of that stuff, we're seeing some impact to those prices of 11 to 12%, depending on how you look at the price point. So some huge impacts, I think, as rates go up, despite the fact, I think at the beginning of the year, we thought prices were going to continue to go up. But the best and really the most compelling builders will still win with the right formulas. If you look at the overall market nationwide, this is actually something that Fortune came out with. This is their forecast of which markets are overvalued. So as you can see, there's quite a few markets that are overvalued. And then you couple that with rising interest rates, you really have to be on your game more than ever. And so here's the simple math. You can see it. And this is just 2.5 to 4.5%. And we've now exceeded that. If you take the median US price and you look at simply that monthly payment shift, a 1% increase in rates, of course, hits price by 11%, a 2% interest rate shift, that can mean as high as 23%. There's a slight decimal point there difference, which is why that jumps up to 23%. So again, just looking at how to get smarter as rates go up, we have to really look at really understanding more than ever what consumers want, what's important today. And so we'll touch on that. Most of you looking at the market, depending on which market you're in, one of the things that I'm seeing, and this is happening a little bit differently throughout the country, but that ultra higher end luxury buyer is still moving for the most part. Now, I do believe the stock market will impact that, but the most affluent segments are working quite well still today. But I do suspect that can soften. As you look at the stock market, and we've seen a pretty significant hit to the stock market, as they start to have issues with trusting their own investments, you'll start to see that market potentially slow down unless something recovers very quickly. They definitely rely on the money they have in the bank, have in their investments, and that is what gives them the confidence to move. But without that, they don't have to move. They're your most discretionary buyer. So when the market tightens, that's usually when you start to see that buyer go away, and it's hard to get them back until they have confidence in the market. But the one buyer that has to move is really that family buyer. And so we're going to look a little bit at the demographic shifts and how that might impact the kind of products you would design today and really what's important there. So where's the growth and where's the opportunity? We'll look just a little bit at the demographics. 62% today are actually moving due to life stage. So that's why I constantly look at life stage and why that's so important. And that's a really big deal when we look at this cycle versus the last one for those that are concerned about the market. So when we look at simple demographic shifts, there's a major difference this time. So the largest generation, Gen Y, is 27 to 42. And this is the prime age for that family buyer that we just talked about that has to move as their households are growing. The second largest generation are the boomers, which is 57 to 77. And this is the prime age for them to sell their family home and also move for retirement. So those two large generational cohorts are why I think this cycle, we're still going to see some pretty strong movement there because one group has to move and one group's going to want to cash out. And that's why markets like Florida, Vegas, Phoenix, some of those commuter markets will really, I think, do very well and have some strong tailwinds despite any shifts in the market. And then last but not least, today and tomorrow's new home buyer under the age of 55, just for consideration as you're doing design, they're going to be much more ethnically diverse too. So keeping that in mind in your designs, I think too, will also be super important. So when we look at those different generations throughout those different generations, it's really Gen Y, Gen X, and the boomer that you're going to want to focus on. Gen Y, even today, more family oriented for sure, but more of they're trying to get that value square footage. The boomer, of course, they're mostly couples, they're spenders, but they want the details and they want it to be sexy and they're mostly working. And then of course, Gen X and the silent Gen. So when we look at our top buyers 10 years ago, it was the boomer buyer. So Gen X and Gen Y, again, 10 years ago, barely starting out as families. So 16 to 31. And when you look at the boomer, it was the perfect age for retirement today. But when we look back then, they were only 48 to 67. So a very small percentage of those with the average age of retirement at age 62 were actually ready to retire. So 10 years ago, we didn't quite have the right demographics in play, in addition to some of the shifts that were going on in the market. And as you look at Gen X and you look at sort of where they were at, actually they were in full family mode. So now we look at today, and again, Gen Y's perfect age for family, the boomers perfect age for retirement. Again, average age for retirement being 62, average age for marriage is anywhere from 27 to 29, and same thing with children, somewhere in that same category. So it does appear to be different, and that impacts completely your product strategies. The other thing that we have going on is nearly 5 million Americans have moved since 2020 because of remote work opportunities. That's certainly going to impact your product trends as well. And then we also have a lot of different things happening geographically. So we have people from dense, high-cost urban metros, that certainly accelerated. Sunbelt metros and select interior parts of the country gained a lot of new people. We had many moves in nearby counties, actually with suburban sprawl. With the biggest cohort of the urban sort of categories were affluent adults who now can work remotely. And then we also have additional growth in areas like Seattle or Denver, where we had a much younger profile there. Now, when we look at the demographic shifts, they're now pushing out to suburban sprawl, not just because they can work remotely, but of course, so many more of them are forming families as I just showed you. So why are we seeing this kind of migration and all of that? Part of it's affordability, part of it's lifestyle, and frankly, part of it's life stage, just where they're at today. So again, one of the comments here was America's densest cities are becoming playgrounds for the rich and the childless. I thought that was interesting as it relates to some of those urban locations. But as we look at population, you can really see the South between Texas, California, certainly Florida are some of your most populated areas. And as we look to the growth, Texas, Nevada, Utah. I suspect Arizona, you'll see some of the numbers to support that, and Idaho. I think Idaho is the fastest growing, definitely in the West, as it relates to the population. The other thing that's interesting is you look at median home value. Obviously, we have our most expensive markets like New York and California, no big surprises there, but other markets that are getting a lot less affordable, like Seattle, Denver, and some of those areas. And as you look to some of those affordability locations, not everybody's drawn to the most affordable areas. It's still ending up to the most expensive are the places that people are going today. If we look at median income and median net worth, no big surprises there. I'm always surprised by Minnesota on the median income and median net worth. But when you look to that and some of the areas that will be cashing out and moving to Florida, like Minnesota, that's certainly important to know from a marketing perspective. As we look to migration and what's happened, I pulled this, I had this in a prior presentation from 2020, where people were losing consumers moving from one state to another, but also where they were going. So in 2020, you can see the numbers here. And a lot of those inbound states were interesting, like South Dakota and Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, the Carolinas for sure, Arizona and Oregon. But when we look at those today, and this is from Redfin, you'll see a lot of them are just the affordable markets, certainly influenced by retirees. Largely, when you look at Florida, certainly Sacramento, Arizona, and some of those markets, again, the Carolinas, specifically Charlotte, that tends to be more family oriented. And then a lot of families fleeing to markets like Texas. You can see, again, the impact of that and how that might translate to where you want to go from a product perspective. We also have the no tax states. I always look at this from a retirement perspective. Certainly that's a draw to Florida, but almost all of the no tax states to the South are benefiting very, very positively from migration as well. And then there's markets like California, where it's number 2 in Sacramento, still very tough. We have the worst taxes in the country, but still very desirable place to live. So when we look at this just from a life stage or sort of a consumer segment perspective, you can kind of see where the top retirement locations are, where the affluent older families are, which frankly, we're shifting from a high population of young families and then a high population of retirees. So you don't see a ton of that on this map. And then you'll see some of the affordable kind of tertiary locations that some of the families are going to. They tend to be very much more ethnically diverse. And then those rural locations are sort of a new hotspot that people are moving to, just with the idea of being able to telecommute and things like that. They still usually want to be within an hour to 2 hours of where they're working. So top growth regions, you can actually see how they look throughout the country. I mean, it's still largely those young families, but you can see the areas that are attracting also that boomer buyer as well, and how that might impact product. So we're going to ask a couple of questions that we'd actually like you to participate in. And while you aren't the whole audience for the new home population out there, I think it'd be interesting just to see, with those of you who are on the call, how you might answer these. So our very first question, Amanda's going to help with this. We're going to ask the question, do you use any part of your home differently today than you did before the pandemic? If you can answer yes or no. And then Amanda, that should just automatically pop up, correct?
I believe so. Can you guys see it? I launched it.
I'm going to see if I can drop it over here. And do they have to hit it on their screen? Last time it just came up as a single question.
I am hearing that it has popped up and people can see it.
Yeah, I just put it on the screen.
Okay.
Is it a live question though, Amanda? The way it is? Let's see if this works. Last time we got it to work, it worked great.
Yes, so it is showing all of the questions at once. And then once you've answered all the questions, we'll be able to see the answers for each of them.
Oh, they have to answer them all at the same time?
Yes.
No, I don't know how that's going to happen. Huh. Okay, let's try it. Let's see what happens.
So at the moment for question number 1, we are having about 80% of our audience is saying yes, they're using their home differently. It's about 83%.
Wow, that's a pretty big number. So do we go to the second one now?
So everyone, we're still getting some answers, but we can move on to the second one. So for number 1, we're mid to high 80s on yes, using our home differently.
I could see that. I'm definitely using my home differently.
Do you want to go over the second question, Molly?
Yeah, let's do the second question. So the second question is if you said yes to that, which part of your home has changed, and select all that apply. And then so choose that first, and we're going to look at which spaces have had the biggest impact.
So it seems like our audience is saying about 20% of them are using their kitchen and family room differently. About 45% are using office space, 20% using their backyard entertainment space differently, and about 25% using the bedroom layout differently.
That makes sense to me too. So certainly office is a big change, and we'll talk a lot about that. And then the next question is, I broke this out by age group. And so I really want to see if you're under 45, answer the first question. If you're over 46 and older, or over 45, answer the next question. It's the same question essentially though, which is, which do you identify most with for your next home? Are you looking for more space and you're willing to drive, or more space and you're willing to pay more? Less space, location matters. Less space, price matters. Pick the one that matches you, and please take that at the same time.
So Molly, our questions might be a little skewed here because it seems like we needed to have a not applicable option for them. But at the moment for question number 3, 45 and under, it seems like people are most identifying with less space because location matters. And coming up close behind it is more space, willing to pay more.
So location's everything for that. And then 46 and older?
46 and older, the most important, less space, location matters. And that's 55% of the answers.
I love it. Okay, great. That'll tie very closely with what we're going to talk about. And then the very last one is the following are most important to me when selecting my next home: better technology, more space, and there should be 2 more: affordability, a better lifestyle, and more amenities.
Well, we've got a landslide answer here at 68%, a better lifestyle with more amenities in my community. And coming up behind that is more space at 42% and affordability at 34%.
And what is technology?
28.
Wow. And that ties pretty much with what we have. And then last but not least, oh no, we have 2 more. Sorry, I didn't realize these are all going together. So the next question is, how much more time are you spending at home since the pandemic?
And that one, Molly, we have a lot of various answers here. So 35% of our respondents are saying they've spent 50% more time at home. And then we have a tie between 25% and 75% more, with 25% of our audience.
But so we have over 50% that are spending quite a bit more time at home. That's interesting. Yes. Okay, you guys, I swear we're almost done with this test. How often do you work at home today? 1 to 2 days, 3 to 4 days, mostly full time, or I don't work at home at all?
We've got a good split here, Molly. We have 29% of our respondents saying they come in they work from home 1 to 2 days a week. 27% do not work at home. 26% work mostly full-time at home, and 19% 3 to 4 days a week.
Nice. Nice. So that's really interesting. So it's less than 1 in 3 that actually don't work at home. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Wow. And then and so that's a huge number when you're looking at product. Obviously, office is super important. And obviously, so many more are working at home today. And then last but not least, which do you prefer? Working at home part-time, full-time, or I prefer going into the office?
And there we have a pretty landslide here. 65% of people prefer working at home part-time. 19% prefer going into the office full-time. And only 16% say they would prefer to work at home full-time.
Wow.
So most people would like a hybrid.
Nice. That's perfect, you guys. So we're going to dive into, I think you can look at that as a balance for sort of how that's going to impact product as well. So we're going to skip through those. Really interesting. Okay. So motivations and attitude, this is going to tie completely with what you guys just said. It's really about location first. And then of course, home design and then price. Community amenities, maybe not as high up as many of you said. Safety coming in as fourth, but certainly amenities is very close there. When we look at actually the location factor, it's, just like all of you on this call, it's very important to all of your consumers as well. And so when we also look at sort of what's important to them, certainly space is important, but the lifestyle piece is even greater. For most of your consumers, affordability comes in faster. When we ask consumers top home features, this is pretty consistent with what we've seen in the past. Interior style and function are super important. And of course, larger home and larger yard are down there at the bottom. And many of you agreed with that. You were all willing to give up space, which is so important when you're looking at your strategies. Almost 90% in all regions chose interior style as their top home feature that they were looking for as well, followed by function. And then, as prices get more challenged, the reality is, there is the dropping of price. And I'm seeing a lot of that already so quickly, but also really focusing on home design, I think is going to be more important than ever in the future. Almost 60% of your shoppers today want a home under 2,500 square feet. So like you, they'd prefer to actually give up that square footage to get a really good location. And you can get a great house under 2,500 square feet. We're just seeing so many more consumers cocooning at home. Again, look at how low the numbers were for the number of people that really wanted to go into the office full time, and sort of how they're using their homes. That great room or family room, so important, but even offices. When we look at some of those differences by region that were worth mentioning, obviously amenities, like for all of you, very important, over 50% throughout the country, up to 73% in Florida. As we look to multi-level homes, again, we let them choose more than once for the different things that were important. So whether it was 2-story or 3-story, all would consider a multi-level home for the most part. The other part too is when you look at the age groups over the age of 55, plenty would consider a multi-level home in those A locations like you, and all of them want those A locations as long as you offset that with something like an elevator. So it's not that they're going to use that elevator every day, it's that they might use it one day. Up to 49% actually wanted a childless retirement community. So that was age restricted or targeted. I find that to be pretty staggering. I know I've shared that with you guys plenty of times, but that's a really big number that really does want to live in a childless community. And I think one of the biggest opportunities over the next 10 years, for those of you who are working in age restricted or age targeted, is the fact that you have reverse mortgages. People can buy a home with the equity they've taken out of their home. And as long as they come in with 50% down, they can get a reverse mortgage and never have a mortgage payment again. It's one of those things that most consumers just don't know about. they don't understand it. And only 1 in 4 of the consumers today understands how to use a reverse mortgage. If I was selling active adult, I'd have reverse mortgage all over the walls explaining how cool that is, because they can really get the house they want. More things just on home details. A front porch, huge. 48% wanted a porch and 67% want a large rear yard equating to 15 feet. Outdoor space, we find it's all about privacy first and then entertainment. But this is a 15-foot backyard that you're looking at right here. And it's beautiful. It's lots of privacy, feels really good. And up to 80% would consider a 15-foot yard. Again, like you, who wants a great location, they'll give up that big backyard for that. Almost 50% want a great room plus 1 formal space. Just know it could be a defined nook as long as it's a defined space, but more are going to use it for entertainment space than anything. But again, as long as you have that great room and 1 defined space, I think that's important. And you can actually see that here. Interior styles, we're still seeing modern trending up. I do suspect as the market begins to shift, we're going to see that start to soften a little bit. Usually when people get nervous about the market and things start to shift there, you will see people go back to more traditional values or safer choices, if you will. And in these numbers, most are actually leaning to somewhat modern. The other big thing is we ask consumers how they believed quality transferred into home design. And so many of them tied that to, it's those little extra details. Even in a modern home, wainscoting is beautiful. Trim is beautiful. It's the kind of trim and some of that stuff that you actually use to still pull that off. But it was really the wood detailing that made the difference between a great builder and a super quality builder. Pets, 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 for sure. We've talked a lot about pets, but over 50% want that built-in pet space of some sort somewhere. So make sure that you're accommodating for that. I don't know about you guys, but I have more dogs than I'm even willing to admit on this webinar. And so just, I think through the working at home and things like that, we tend to have more pets than we did pre-pandemic as well. Looking at packages, more want the professionally designed packages over individual choice. When we ask consumers, they could choose more than one, which would they consider the highest percentage that people would consider as professionally designed packages? And yes, this does translate into the highest price points. The difference is the word professional. If you're going to pay a designer to actually design your home and you have more choice, if you can come in with professionally designed packages by a designer who does this for a living, I don't know about you guys, I've been doing this for a very long time, and choosing all those little details and pieces is tough. And so having a professional designer help you is a big deal. Other simple things as you're designing homes, the tub is still preferred by over 50%. It is falling in favor, but I will tell you, even the 55 plus market, it's over 50%, just slightly, it's 51%, actually still wants the bathtub in their suite. And it's about the dream of having the bathtub more than anything. So now one of the big talking features is about the office. We are seeing quite a few dramatic shifts there. So when you look at the numbers in the past and the percentages that want a 3-bedroom, they now want a 4-bedroom. Those that wanted a 4 want a 5. At the same time, we all want a better location too. So it's really getting that function that's so crucial in doing all of this. We ask this question, of course, how many more of you are spending time at home? We have all those answers. How many are working at home? The majority are working at home at least 1 to 2 days, if not 3 to 4. And many of you want that hybrid, as Amanda shared. So home has gone really from being this sort of afterthought on the side, uncomfortable, to really becoming something great. And people are redoing bedrooms and things like that. So the more you can create this, the emotion you get from selling this, again, in a more challenging time versus, the idea of actually living in this, can really make the difference between getting the sale. Or you can do a buy down at 5 points, and that's a pretty big number. That could be, well over $50,000, and you wouldn't spend that doing something like this. Multiple home offices obviously trending. We actually have a pretty large percentage that wants to have more than one office as well. I've got some of those numbers for you too. So the other part of this too is when you look at the high percentage of people that want that hybrid, this is an interesting stat that I found. The average employee resigning today is making 18% more at their new job. So give them the choices they want. People usually don't leave for more money. They usually leave because they're not happy where they're at. And so the cost to pay and replace those consumers instead, give them great offices, help your consumers live the way they want to live. The other big thing that we're seeing is just the shift in multi-generational living, particularly if the market is to change. I think we're going to see some pretty significant shifts here. But even today, it's 1 in 3 that actually offer multi-generational is actually selling. And so thinking through how important that is, when we ask consumers, did they think their next home they wanted to actually plan that for either an 18-plus-year-old child or an elderly parent? Just for elderly parent alone, it was 35 to 37% said yes, they would like that in their next home. So getting that right, making it the right size, and truly having a suite, not just a bedroom down, albeit over 80% do want to have a bedroom on the main level. It's doing it right. So here's just a simple version. As you guys can see, this is a 40-foot wide house. Pulling that multi-generational suite to the front is really the key to making this great. You don't want to use the back of the house where the person who bought the house is spending most of their time. Again, all of you said as well that the great room was the most important, but living off the back of that house and that relationship to the yard's important. But you also want to be able to give this person a relationship to their own private yard, whether it's with the door, off of the living room, which I strongly recommend that you have like a little bistro table and some chairs. And so they have their own space too, but not taking up the back of the house where that's the most important to the person who's buying the home. So this is a good example of what not to do. So you'll see this still lives actually really nicely, but you lost this really important space that would have otherwise accommodated, again, the main user of the home. Other simple things, as we get into all the things that we've seen over the last couple of years, the safe room, it's interesting to me that it's wanted by over 40% in Texas and South Florida, and 1 in 3 actually wants this feature in the Midwest, Northern Florida, and the Southeast. As we look at home technology, there's some interesting trends here as well. As we look to technology as a whole, I think is a big game changer. It's a great way through a market that's a little more stressed or even not stressed to really separate yourself from the competition. And we all know our competition really is the resale market, as much as many think it's the builder sitting next door. Typically anywhere from 60 to 85% of the sales activity is actually going to be turned over to the resale market. So technology can really make a difference. It did rate very low amongst this group, which is interesting to me. It does actually on the consumer side too. And I think part of that is just controlling your own technology. The other part of it I've learned doing some qualitative work in this category is they just expect it. So I think that makes a difference too. But over 60% want those professionally designed technology packages. 1 in 3 of your consumers said that they would pay an additional $5,000 if you gave them a full technology package in their home. When you look at things like clean living, we've talked about that. It's well over 50%. So those things should be sort of considered a standard. All health and all healthy kind of features like that are so big today, as many of you know. Clean living trends like clean air rates well over 50% as well, as you can see, and you can see the prices that we had in our survey. The other portion of it is things like online streaming, as you're looking at advertisement and things like that are a lot less expensive. Certainly that's a much bigger deal. But in addition to that, just the idea of really strong Wi-Fi, that's some of the disadvantages I've seen several communities actually fail in and have a hard time selling because the strong Wi-Fi capability just isn't there. So making sure that that's there too. Other interesting ones from an appliance perspective, I found this one fascinating. LG and Samsung actually rival Whirlpool and GE, and I know those have been the favorites for so many years and for good reason. They all make beautiful appliances, but we have some new players in town really rivaling and coming in with some new tech features that may be interesting, not just to the younger generation, but all generations. It's just unique and different. Another big question that I get often is all about electric. Certainly the number that want that electric vehicle charger in their garage, you can see it's up to 60%, but in most markets, I would say the average here is somewhere in that 50% range. So just doing the pre-wire for it, I think is the most important piece that every home should include, and that's the pre-wire. The box or whatever individual charging station may change, but that pre-wire is so instrumental just given where the market's going today. I think in California, our prices today, I went to the gas station yesterday, $8 a gallon, ridiculous. How about electric for the home? So this is where the numbers are very different. And so many of the very urbanized areas are pushing to go all electric. I do suspect these trends are going to change, but today it's only 25% want all electric in their home today. And I get that question a whole lot as to how they should go. If you have a choice, I would still lean to gas ranges. But if it is sort of a jurisdiction thing, it is what it is. From a solar perspective, over 40% want and will pay for solar. It is more preferred in the South. So the warmer states, certainly there's a higher percentage. In some cases, that number is over 50%. And 1 in 3 actually would pay for a net zero ready home as well. So top conclusions as we sort of wrap up today, big trends, obviously consumers are willing to move to the suburban, the fringe locations. What we heard today was location, 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 and that's still the same for all consumers. It's just going back to the basics. Who's living with me? What can I afford? What are my choices and how far am I willing to drive? The South and Southwest continue to benefit from more of our growth, certainly in the future. The top generational segments over the next 2 to 5 years is definitely Gen Ys, followed by young boomers looking for retirement, or for Gen Ys, it's their first home. Home design really is going to be your biggest opportunity, I think, in the next 5 years as the market continues to shift. And it doesn't have to cost more. That's such a big deal. It has to be when you look at how compelling it is for consumers today. Specialty features, the unexpected features they don't expect to get, the little things like the trim details that we talked about. It's the front porch. It's those emotional things that are going to help them to actually purchase that I think will be a big deal in the future. And then brands, it's really about what you're going to offer them to give them a better life. But brands do matter a lot more, particularly when we're buying a lot more online today. And just, however you can make their decisions easier, whether it's by packages, talking through how that home's going to live and learning more about who they are and what they want. Certainly you're bound to live. I always end with this slide. At the end of the day, your goal is to just simply give them a better life and make their life a little bit easier in everything you do and everything you design. And with that, thank you for attending. We will post within 24 hours. Any feedback you'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear it. You can see our social media channels here too. And with that, we have about 15 minutes. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Molly. We do have a couple questions here. So Lyman asks, how is the new home market moving towards solar panels and self-cleaning gutters?
So solar panels we have in there, it's about 40% throughout the country. That does change by region. Obviously the southern areas in the South where it's warmer, it's much more popular. In some cases, it's well over 50%. On gutters, I didn't ask about gutters, but it's a good one for our next survey.
Mm-hmm. And Christine is asking, I believe in Texas, you mentioned there's a high demand for safe rooms. And she was wondering, is that safe rooms as in for valuables or safe rooms as in protection from tornadoes?
It's more along the lines of protection from tornadoes, and we actually did have a picture in the survey about that. So yeah, it's definitely more human safe room.
And George says, what about storage needs for the new home buyer?
Storage is probably the most commonly asked for thing in all forms. So storage is huge. And we do have a ton on storage. So what you're seeing in today's survey and our findings that we're sharing with you is probably about 15 to 20%. But yes, so I can talk about walk-in closets. We can talk about pantry storage. We can talk about all of those things. And I could give that to you by life stage, but 100% storage is huge.
Excellent. And I think that is all of our questions for today, Molly. Thank you
Okay,
so much for
great.
your wonderful presentation. Like Molly said, we'll have the recording emailed out and posted on our social media channels within 24 hours.
Okay, thanks everyone for attending. Have a great week. Take care.